All right, so here I just launched Unreal 5. I just went to Epic Games Launcher and clicked Launch. I'm running 5.0.3 right now. So if you're at anything in 5, you should be good. We're going to do games. I do want to quickly highlight, though, that Unreal is used for film and video and live events. So I don't know, maybe if you've been to like a DJ rave or something, all the crazy light effects. There's a chance some of that stuff was run in Unreal. But more realistically, I believe if you've watched some of the Disney Plus Star Wars stuff that they've used the giant television screens instead of green screen. I believe some of that stuff was running in Unreal at the time to make it all kind of work in tandem with the on-set lighting and the camera movements and the characters to really make that look realistic. So a lot of that stuff can be done in Unreal. You can also do architecture for different renderings, as well as some simulations to an extent to like test the actual architecture of the building. And the same with like automotive product design and manufacturing. If you've ever seen a car commercial that doesn't say it's a stunt driver on a closed course, chances are that was actually like an animation that might have been rendered in Unreal or something like it. As well as like a phone commercial. It's not really a phone like suspended on fishing wire or anything like that. It's a 3D model that's been animated and is being rendered potentially in something like Unreal again. So it's definitely used for that. But this is Trad Game Dev. So we're going to go ahead and use games here. And what's really nice about Unreal is, yes, it has this blank template, which is just a clean, empty project with no code. Very nice. But for your first game, I want you to use some of these templates here. So I'm totally fine with you using a first-person template, a third-person template, top-down, any of those. Probably don't use vehicle. I mean, you can maybe mess around with that if that seems interesting to you. But a lot of the blueprints I'm going to show you how to make really wouldn't work in the vehicle too well, I don't think. You could even look at like the VR stuff if you have those capabilities. I'm going to go ahead and just stick with a third person. I think that'll be probably the easiest to kind of grasp and see everything and how it's all working. So I'm going to click third person. And then over here, the project defaults. This all used to be on different pages, different windows, but now it's all on one screen here. So definitely make sure you're on blueprints. We're going to keep it desktop and maximum quality. I do want to keep my starter content here. I think it'll be nice to have some of those textures and materials and things, and maybe even a particle effect, right? That might help quite a bit. Ray tracing, I really don't need to enable that. There's really nothing that's going to utilize that. Even though I am RTX capable, I could have that on. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it off. It's totally fine. And then down here, just keep an eye on where it's saving it to. That way, if you ever need to move it from computer to computer, you know where it's at. By default, it should be in your documents and then a folder called Unreal Projects. I'm just going to leave that as the default. That's totally fine. And then I will change the name here to, I don't know. Let's see. I think I called it my first blueprint game, right? We're going to do our first game and keep it kind of simple. So I'm going to go ahead and click create on that, and I will see you after the jump. Okay, so that's loaded up. Just took a little bit. It just usually kind of brings down that window where you can pick all your project settings, and then kind of just loads for a little bit. If it's the first time you're doing it on your computer after installing Unreal, it might take a little while. That's kind of why I cut away. Is even though I've opened Unreal a few times, it was taking a little bit. So usually I just kind of cut that part out so we can jump right in. But once it loads up, you should be greeted with something like this. Again, I picked the third person template. So that's what I have here. And I got to be honest, I'm old. I remember Unreal Development Kit. I remember when Unreal 4 first came out and when it went free and everybody was stoked about that and it was awesome. But the UI back then for 4 was a lot different than this. So there are some things I'm still kind of getting used to, but you should see something similar to this. The first thing I want to do, just because I think it's actually pretty helpful, is I'm going to go up to Window, and I'm going to look for Place Actors. Okay, so Window, Place Actors. So there was this little tab here by default in Unreal 4 that was really helpful. So I recommend having that up, at least for this part, as we're going to start, putting some different platforms out there and kind of start building a basic level for our game, right? It'll be nice to be able to put some platforms and things out there and kind of dress this up a little bit. So once again, that was Window, Place Actors. Like I said, on 4, that was there by default. It seems like it's not there by default in 5, but I'm so used to seeing it that I always pull it up. So that's kind of my recommendation, because I guess old habits die hard, right? The other thing that's different for me is the content browser is now called the content drawer. And you might have already gotten a pop-up here that said, control space to bring that up, and then put it away. So if I have that up, this is what Unreal 4 more or less looked like. So this feels like home to me, which is kind of funny, but you can leave that down and have a little bit more space to look at the level that we currently have pulled up, right? So you should be seeing something kind of like this. Right in the middle is the viewport. It's showing me whatever level I am currently working in. And since there's really just the template level and that's the default level, it opened that up. And usually they did kind of simplify and streamline these buttons up here. Back on 4, there was this giant play button that was like literally this big that I'm kind of drawing on the screen with my cursor here. It was literally like just massive. And when I was teaching Unreal 4, generally the first thing students would notice was that giant play button. Now, of course, it's green, so you might still notice it. But that was usually the first thing students would notice. So let's go ahead and hit that play button. And there we go. And it says click for mouse control. So right now I still have my selection I can click out, in the editor. But if I want to start playing this level and see what's going on, I have to click in the viewport. And now if I move my mouse, I'm looking around with my third-person camera. And if I do WASD, I can run around, spacebar to jump. That's pretty cool. Neat stuff. Looks like it's got some physics actors in here that I can interact with, so you can kind of see how that's all working. It's got this little ramp. We call that, in the industry, we call that affordance. I see a ramp. I want to run up it and jump off of it. So very cool. So I already have a moving character, the ability to run around and jump. This is great. All I really have to do is start building content around this, okay? If you want to stop playing, you can just hit escape. And that's perfect. Okay, and you'll notice that when I hit play and I play around and then hit escape, my camera is wherever I was last looking while I was playing, right? And that's fine. If you ever kind of get lost, I actually do this quite often. If I'm working on my level and I'm like, okay, I need to get back to where my character is because I got to do something on the character and I don't know where exactly I am in my massive level, and I need to get right to my character, I'll do this sometimes. I'll hit play and then immediately hit escape, and then I'll have my player spawn, so I can start messing with oh, maybe I want the character to spawn over in this corner instead of right here, or something like that, right? Whoops. But let's say you want to start moving the camera around, right? Kind of like I was just doing there. So right now you can see my cursor up there in the clouds here. It might be kind of hard to see up against the gray. But you can see right now I'm in what I like to call select mode. If I move my mouse around, I just have my cursor, right? And so to move my camera around, I got to put my cursor into what I call camera mode. And to do that, all I'm going to do is right click and hold, and you'll see my cursor disappear. And if I move my mouse now, I'm looking around, right? I believe they call this tumbling the camera. Some interesting stuff happening up there. Very cool. Tumbling the camera, right? Okay, and if I let go of the right mouse, I then have my cursor back so I can start clicking on things and selecting them. All that fun stuff. And then if I want to move my camera and look over here, right click and hold, move the cursor, all that stuff, okay? Now, in order to actually move to a different spot and look at this level from a different location, I can kind of fly around when I'm in camera mode. And to do that, once again, I'm going to right click and hold to go into camera mode. See, I'm looking around. And then I can do WASD to fly around, almost like I'm playing a game, almost like I'm flying around in a game, right? As long as I'm holding down the right mouse button and looking around, I can also fly around with WASD. And that's pretty cool. It's a little bit different probably than any 3D program you've used. If you're used to Maya, you can like hold down Alt and then left click and drag to kind of rotate and zoom in with the mouse wheel and stuff. You can kind of do that, but really I find flying around in Unreal is much easier. If you want to move straight up and down, it's Q is down, and then E is up, Q and E. So it's WASD and then Q and E. Right? So kind of weird. You can get used to that. If you find that the camera is too fast or too slow, if you look up here at the top right corner of the viewport, there's this little camera icon, and if I hover over it, it says camera speed. If I click on that, I have a couple of things in here I can change. I would recommend not changing the speed scaler. Just leave that at 1. It's a scaler. If I'm scaling it by 1, that's totally fine. I can change the speed here, however. Okay, so if I cut it in half, it was 4, now it's 2, and I'm moving around. It's much slower. So if I was like, you know, trying to get up close to this physics block or whatever and change how it's positioned or something, I could do that here. Or if I find that 2 and 4 were too slow, I could speed this up, and now it's way crazy, which might not be very good, right? So again, if I wanted to get my camera back to where I was, I could hit play and then hit escape and I'd be right there. Or I could look in my outliner here, which is a list of every single actor I have in my scene. Unreal calls them actors. And I might just come in here and look for something that kind of makes sense to me. I don't know, some of these cubes, right? So maybe I'll just click on a cube and then I'll hit F on the keyboard. F as in frame or focus. And that will focus my camera in there. And then before I start moving around again, I might want to slow that down. And now I'm back. So kind of nice. The other way you can change the camera speed is while you're looking around and flying around, you can scroll up or down on the mouse wheel. So I scroll down and it slows down. And if I want to speed up, I can scroll up. Now it's really fast and I can slow it back down by scrolling down. Slow it way down. Okay, so I usually do that. I just leave these numbers right where they're at and just kind of scroll up and down for whatever my needs are. And that's kind of how I do that. Okay. So it is a little bit weird. You might have to kind of get used to how you move the camera around. But in order to actually bring more shapes into this level, if you wanted to start building something a little bit or blocking out things to make it look a little more interesting, this is why I have that Place Actors tab open now. And I can start dragging out these shapes, and I'll just drag out a cube. Again, I've clicked on this one right here that says Shapes. You could do the geometry shapes, but that's not necessary for what we're working on. But you can drag those out. They're just a little bit different. And they have some different behaviors and things that you can do with them. But for now, we're trying to just keep it very simple. We'll go with just the regular shapes. And once I drag that cube out, I'll do it again. Just click and drag it. Goes out into the world, and I have, that looks familiar, right? If you've used like Maya or Blender or anything like that, even Unity, right? I have my move tool here. And I know it's my move tool because I'm familiar with that, and I'm assuming you're familiar with it from like another software that you've used, another 3D application, right? But if you want to know for sure, you can look up here at the top. Right here, I have my Select Objects cursor. I could just click on that, and now I just have my selection. That's great. I could also click on that one. There's my Move tool, or as they call it, Translate, right? That's a fancy word for move. The next button here is Rotate, and that should look kind of similar to the rotates that maybe you've seen, but it works just the same, right? And then next to that should be Scale. So I'll click on that. There's my Scale tool. Amazing. I can scale it. Okay. If I ever want to undo anything, I can always do Control Z to get back to a point where I liked it. That's pretty good. Okay, and if I hover over these tools again, if I go to the move, it says select and translate objects, and then it says parentheses W, right? So again, if you're familiar with like Maya or something like that, you can in fact just select an object and then hit W and get my move tool. And then click and drag along those axes, right? Keep in mind, this is a nice little tip for you, that Z, the Z axis, is actually up in Unreal. It's an interesting thing. It's just something you get used to, but keep that in mind. So W is my move. E is my rotate, which I always was wondering why R wasn't my rotate. So I had to tell myself R for resize, right? W, if you flip it upside down, it makes an M for move, right? You flip it upside down and it's W for wumbo. It's wumbology, right? W is move, E is rotate, and R is scale, or as I said, resize is how I kind of remembered R for resize, because I always thought it should be rotate. Kind of funny, but so yeah, I mean, let's see what I can do here. Maybe I'll drag out like, I don't know, a cylinder, and I'll move it up a little bit and scale it to make it a little bit skinnier, a little bit taller. And then maybe I'll grab a cone, kind of put it on there. And I'm kind of blocking out like a simple tree, right? Kind of a pine tree, perhaps. And this would work for sure. I think it's a little bit off center. It doesn't quite look centered to me. So maybe I could turn off my movement snapping. It's snapping to the grid right here. It's snapping to the grid when I move it, but it's also rotating. It's snapping to 10 degrees, and it's also scaling, snapping by 0.25 units. If you want to get rid of any of that and do like free move or free rotate or free scale, you can just click on that blue. It'll enable or disable it. So now I can kind of free move it and try and get this to look a little more centered to me. I don't know, it's a little tough. That looks maybe slightly better. Maybe it's just too big. Really not that important right now. I'm just going kind of fast. Then maybe I want to duplicate it and give this like different layers, right, for the tree. So to duplicate something, I can just right click and then find somewhere in here, edit, duplicate. It tells me it's Control D. That's all fine. There's actually an easier way of doing this than right clicking and doing edit, duplicate, or even doing Control D. I should be able to just hold down Alt on the keyboard and then move my selection, and it'll move a copy of it. So I could kind of do this like the classic layered pine tree look, right? And suddenly those basic shapes now look a little bit better than they did before, right? So I can really just block out and make custom art assets very quickly, something that could really go into my level and make it feel like something that's not just these, you know, this gymnasium of grid blocks. I could really make it look like a garden or a forest or some outdoor place, or I could block out a big tower or fortress of some sort, something like that, you know. And then to make this look even a little bit better, because I did the starter content when I made my project, I should be able to bring up my content drawer. So again, you can always come down here and click on it, or you can do Control plus spacebar, right? And here, there's a folder called starter content. If I double click that, there should be materials. And look at that, I already have some cool materials to start messing with. So if I wanted this maybe to look kind of like a tree, I don't know, I could try dragging and dropping like moss onto that. That doesn't look too great to me. Maybe I'll try grass. Still doesn't look that great. I think there is a bush or a leaf one. Maybe they got rid of it. There used to be one on 4 that looked okay, but I don't know. These don't look that great to me. But I'll stick with moss. I think that'll work. And every time I drag that out, that's disappearing, which is kind of annoying. The other way I can do it is I can click on the object And anything I want to change about an object, I can do that over in the details here on the right side. So if I look down here, there's a tab for materials. Element 0 is just that it has one material group. And then right now it's using basic shape material. I can click on that and I can just look for that moss that I'm using. It really doesn't look that much like a pine tree, but I mean, it kind of gives it something. And then here for its trunk, I could look for the materials, and maybe I'll just type in like wood. And oh, look, there's pine. Maybe I'll use pine. There we go. Now if I play the game, there's my cute little pine tree, right? And it's already got collisions and everything. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, that's how you would drag out things. You usually drag things from the left. Again, I brought up that place actors tab so I could drag out things. Drag things out from the left. You can move and scale them. You can also set their scale and rotation and location over here in the details, as well as their materials and anything that you want to change about it. So usually you add from the left into the middle where you're working, and then change the details about it on the right side here. So I'll give you some time to start working on whatever you want to block out and start creating a level that you're wanting to play around in. And I will see you after the jump. Okay, so I've just spent like literally another 30 seconds at most. Just all I did was scale this wall to give me kind of a little corridor. And if I play, I have this little platform. I just did a cylinder. I know it doesn't really match like aesthetically what I have in here. It's this white cylinder next to this gray gymnasium grid kind of thing going on. But if I hit play, I still have my cute little pine tree. Love it. But come out here, I can't jump up to it from down here. So my thinking was that I have to jump and then platform to it, and then I could have like a new section where there's maybe some enemies or something, you know, whatever it is. But I can't make that jump, right? And you'll notice this happens a lot. Like you'll be testing things out, you'll put some platforms out, and then you'll be trying to test it out. Oops, I fell. But you'll notice that like, oh, I have to, you know, stop playing, and I might have to adjust this and all that stuff. But really, I mean, how many third-person platformer games like Mario do you play where the character has a double jump, right? Or has the ability to sprint? And right now, this character does not, right? If I'm kind of just running around, that's its default run speed. If I hold down shift, it doesn't do anything. If I jump, it does it once, but if I try and do it again, it does not double jump. So really quick, I wanted to give just kind of a brief introduction past just the Unreal introduction, just a quick introduction on how to actually do some very basic blueprinting on that character. And it's interesting, on Unreal 4, the character was also at the player start. So there's no character here for me to like open up and start changing. So I'll have to look for it in my content drawer. So again, I'm going to do Control Space, and I'm going to go look for third person blueprints. And there's my BP underscore third person character. Double click that to open up the blueprint. Okay, once that opens up, it took just a second on mine. So again, I kind of did a quick cut there, because I guess it had like a progress bar that I didn't see. Kind of interesting. But once that finally comes up, this is what it came up to by default. It took me to the event graph. So all these little nodes and these cords connecting them, this is blueprinting. So if you've played a game that was made in Unreal recently, over the last probably close to 10 years, there's a good chance that a significant portion of the gameplay and content was programmed in blueprints, as well as C++. I mean, if I were to double click any of these nodes, it would actually open up in like Visual Studio the C++ code that's linked to that node. But really, like, a lot of games will use this programming language, this visual scripting. So it is industry standard, and it's really nice because if you are a more technical person and you want to go into the C++ stuff, definitely do it. But for this first kind of simple game, we're going to stick with the blueprints. And we can kind of look around at this stuff. So to move around on the grid, I can right click and hold, and you'll see my cursor turns into like a little hand grabbing the grid here. And I can just move my mouse around to look around. And then if I want to get a little bit closer to any of these, like here's my jump, right? I can zoom in by scrolling up and then zoom out by scrolling down, right? And they're doing the proper way. They actually set up an input action for the jump. For this first video or so, I probably won't worry about that. Just know that the jump button is in fact spacebar. And then they have this thing, this function that's jump, and then a function that's stop jumping that's already kind of built in, which is nice, which means we can actually utilize that and give our character a double jump very easily, very quickly. You can kind of look at some of these. Here's like the camera input based on the mouse. If you wanted to do a gamepad, you could hook up your Xbox controller and play around with the Xbox controller and run around like that. But pretty simple. The stuff that makes the character move is just this, right? If we go ahead and click on viewport, I can see the character. That's pretty cool. And if I click on the mesh, I could always change the materials. There's these, I guess they call it Quinn for mannequin, right? Quinn, interesting. But you could change the materials on that. I'm going to leave it all the same. The other thing I really wanted to point out is even though this is a whole new window that you really haven't seen yet, there are some similarities, right? I mean, there's a few tabs here. There's the viewport, construction script, and event graph, which we will be doing some stuff in the event graph very shortly here. But you do have the viewport to see what you're working on, right? I can add stuff on the left. I can add components. I can add variables, all kinds of stuff over here. And as I add stuff, they might show up in here, or they'll definitely be attached to the character if I were to make like a score variable or a health variable or something, right? Or if I was to add like static meshes or something to this to kind of accessorize the mannequin, I could do that. And then anything I have added, I can change stuff about it in the details on the right. Okay, so you can kind of see the similarities. What I'm working on is in the viewport in the middle, whether that's the event graph or the actual character viewport. If I want to add stuff, I can add from the left and then change things about it in the details on the right. Okay, and that's kind of a very common thing that you'll see in Unreal on just about everything we work on. There's few exceptions to that. Okay, so the first thing I want to do, let's take a look at the double jump. And if I remember correctly, if I click on the third-person character, or maybe yours says first-person character or top-down character or something, whatever template you picked, it'll probably say that kind of character. But click on the character and click on the self here, the one that says parentheses self. And in here in the details, I'm pretty sure it's under the self. If I do jump, there are these two things I can adjust. One is the jump max hold time. If I hover over that, it's going to tell me about it. The max time the jump key can be held. This could be used to make it so that if you held down the jump key, you jump a little bit higher than if you tapped it. So if you really wanted to try to recreate Mario's jumping, where if you hold the button down, he jumps a little bit higher, you could do that. I'm going to leave that the same though. This one right here is jump max count. Right now it's set to 1. I can just change that to 2. Hit enter. And then I need to compile it. Right now it has, because I changed something, it has a question mark there. Because it's basically telling me, hey, you changed something about this blueprint. I don't know if I can actually compile it. So I'm going to say, okay, go ahead and see. And then it gives me a green check mark, so I know it's good. If something was wrong, it would give me an error, and it would tell me where that error is, and I could go look at it, try and fix it. But all we really did was just change the number of jumps that I can have with the character. I'll minimize that now, and if I play, I can still run around. And if I jump once, that's all good. And if I double jump now, I get a little extra boost. I may not get the extra animation. We could, you know, if we wanted to get more complex with the blueprints, I could make sure that it plays the animation again. But for now, I'm just worried about gameplay and making sure I can actually traverse my level the way I want. So that's good. I have a double jump, which means I can make that jump now, right? And that's awesome. Now, there is one more thing I'd want to do, because what platformer or what game nowadays doesn't have some way of sprinting, right? So to do that, I actually want to jump over to my event graph now, because I got to create some event that's going to tell Unreal, hey, the player is holding down the shift key, so make the character run faster, okay? So I'm going to just find some empty space out here next to some of these nodes that already exist, okay? And I'm going to right click somewhere, and it'll bring up a little search bar, and I'm going to look for, again, I'm not going to really worry about setting up the input actions properly right now. I could show you that in a future video, but for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and search for left shift. And I get a couple of things. I get an input event is left shift down. This is really useful if you're trying to see if the character is pressing a button outside of a character, meaning like on a different blueprint, you can see if the user is holding down that button, is pressing that button. But since I'm on the character, I want to use the keyboard events, left shift. Okay, and when that's pressed, I want to make my character run faster, and when it's released, I want to go back to the regular run speed, right? So the running is actually, let's see, it's called the max walk speed, I believe. And I can find that variable that controls that in my character movement component, okay? So if I click on the character movement component, then in the details here, I can see all the stuff that goes into my character movement. Let's go ahead and search for max walk. And I have max walk speed. Apparently, they've actually added that it's centimeters per second. That's very interesting. So I felt like it was a little slower than Unreal 4. I think the default in 4 was 600. Now it's 500. So I'll keep it 500. That's totally fine. But now I know what that speed is. So if I drag out from pressed and I search set max walk speed, I don't see it. And that's because I kind of need to tell Unreal. Unreal's really smart, but I still need to tell it quite a bit of information. I need to say, hey, look for the max walk speed within the character movement component. And the easiest way to do that is because I have the component listed here, I can just click and drag this out onto the grid and then let go, and there's my character movement. And then I can drag from there and say set max walk speed. And yes, there is one when crouched, so there is a built-in crouch function. However, there's no animation for it, so you'll probably just be clipping through walls from like the chest up, right? Or I believe sometimes, I seem to recall it actually just T-posing the character if you don't have an animation, but like make a pose for it without the animation, it'll like T-pose because there's no animation set. So you could, assert your dominance and T-pose through all these things. Maybe that would be cool, but I'm not going to worry about when crouched. I don't need it right now. So I'm going to do set max walk speed. And when it's pressed, I'm going to click from they call these pins. It kind of looks like an arrow on this one, right? Or like home plate in baseball or something. I'm going to click and drag from pressed and connect it to the corresponding one here, right? And you'll notice that these white, these are called like the execute pins. They're kind of these white that have, it looks like that arrow or home plate or something. You'll notice that like this event doesn't have anything that could feed into it. It can only feed out into the next one. So you just want to make sure you drag out into that one. And then if I had it do something else, I drag from this and into the next one and so on, right? But here, when I'm holding that left shift button, I want to make sure my character is going faster. So if it's 500, I want it to go 3 times as fast maybe. So I'll do 1500. Perfect. Okay. Then when I release it, I just need to set it back down to its default value. So I can click on this set and do Control C. And then I'll just click kind of right here and then do Control V. And there's that. And then when it's released, I'll drag that out and connect it there. And I'll set it back down to 500. Awesome. And then if I compile, because again, I've changed something, it doesn't know if it can actually compile. If I compile this, it's going to say there's an error. Okay, there's my error. And down here it says, target must have a connection on this node. Oh yeah, I need to tell it to look in the character movement again. So I'll just click and drag and connect that up and now compile and I have no error, okay? And I can kind of clean this up a little bit. You'll have wires crossing and have kind of colorful spaghetti code. It's okay. And then one last thing I can maybe do on this just to kind of clean it up a little bit more is I can left click and drag to select all the nodes and then hit C on the keyboard, C as in comment, to add a little comment here that just says, sprint. Perfect. And even though maybe you have more of a technical background, if I were to call this, commenting some blueprints, I don't mean commenting it out like in a regular kind of scripting environment. What I mean is add a little label to it, right? So these comments are labels so that I can later, when I have like 100 of these different blocks in here doing each a little bit different thing, I can go, oh yeah, that one does my sprint because I named it sprint, right? It's just a label. It's not commenting it out. It's just adding a comment so I can find it later a little bit easier, which is nice. And then you can always change the color on it. If I click on it and make sure I'm not searching for anything in the details, I can change the color, the font size, all kinds of stuff. But I'll keep it that default. That's totally fine. Okay, so I'll compile it, and I'm always in the habit, whenever I've done something like this, I'll do compile and save, minimize it. Let's go ahead and play again. So here's my regular run speed or walk speed, and if I hold down shift, you can see now I'm going a lot faster. And then if I let go of shift, it goes back down to my regular. Now again, the animation isn't quite, really, it's not really selling that, but from a gameplay standpoint, I can now sprint and then jump and get a really far jump, which is kind of nice, right? So now if I were to run and do this, I might need to double jump there, but if I was sprinting, I probably would not. In fact, I had too much jump, right? I had too much speed. So I can maybe slow that sprint down or something. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of just a very basic start on how to actually start changing and creating blueprints to add some gameplay and kind of tweak mechanics and make the game your own, okay? Hey, just one more really small thing that I kind of forgot to mention that I really wanted to mention. As you're moving things around and stuff, you might be wondering, like, hey, how do I save all my stuff? Unreal is a little bit weird, and maybe it's gotten better, but my habit, just because of Unreal 4, was to always click on the 2 different save buttons that I could find, right? So, right here, it's actually going to try and do an auto save. I'm going to click cancel on that just so I can show you how to save. Right here at the top left is a floppy disk. Anybody remember those? I remember playing some games and stuff off of floppy disks. I remember those days. You can click on that to save current. So that's going to save the current thing I have open here. So that's the current level. I really only have 1 level, so that's totally fine. Click on that. It brings up a little progress bar just for a split second saying that it's saved. That's awesome. But there is kind of another one. And again, in Unreal 4, the content browser was always open. So it was really easy to see this one. But I might also want to do save all, especially as I start making my own blueprints and my own materials and my own things. I always want to make sure I do save current because that's currently what I'm working on, as well as save all if I were to especially since I changed the event graph on my character. If I were to just close out of this, it would ask me if I wanted to save that particular thing. But what I find is just, bringing up the content drawer and then hitting save all should be just fine. So save current and then save all. You could also do file and do save current, which is Control S, and then save all, Control Shift S. So that's just kind of, again, the habit I have. Save current, save all. Save current, save all. Okay?